All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're back for another podcast, Bokeh Podcast episode. We're here to help photographers create sustainable businesses. And actually, to that point, I've got a return guest on the show today, Matt Odom, and we're going to be talking about how to think proactively about our finances as photography business owners, particularly in the midst of coronavirus and all that's come as a result. But thanks for hanging out again with us, Matt.
Hey, no problem, man. I'm glad to be back, man. Glad to be back.
Well, and you were actually, for those of you who haven't heard Matt on the Bokeh Podcast previously, if you go back to episode 245, and we'll link to this in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com, but Matt came on and chatted with us about kind of a practical guide or approach to commercial photography, which is his specialty. And you can get to know Matt a little bit better, too, just by listening to that episode. Matt, there are a couple of questions that I've been asking our guests this year, fresh questions, if you will, that I didn't have the opportunity to ask you when you were on before. I just wanted to jump into those really quick before we get into the main topic, if we can. But talk to me about customer experience. What is, from your experience as a photography business owner, what's one of the most important principles you found in delivering a really great customer experience?
Be on time, be nice, follow up, and build a relationship. If you do those, most of my clients are return clients.
Okay.
I'd say probably, if I had to put a percentage on it, Nate, I'll probably say about 90 to 93% of my clients are return clients. I mean, I'm before this pandemic broke out, I was working with a client that I worked with for the last 5 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, it just kind of just tells you if you do a good job at professional. I think the one thing I hear from a lot of clients, whether they're new or people that I meet in passing, is that I've heard that that it's a big problem with professionalism. And I was kind of alarmed by that when I heard it. I was like, well, what's that problem? But what I figured is that some people just get bigger than their britches.
Okay.
And forget that you know where they came from.
Yeah.
And people don't understand this is a business, man, whether you're, on the retail side of things or on the commercial side of things, that people are required for you to be in work, And so you have to treat people, you have to be gracious for the opportunity.
Yep.
It's a privilege. I don't think photographers realize it's a privilege that we're able to do something that we like to do for a living. And to your question, customer experience is paramount, because word spreads quicker than anything else. I mean, all it takes is, but they say bad news travels quicker than good news.
It's so true, especially in our photography industry.
Yeah, man. You can end up on a couple of lists real quick, man. Especially on my side of things. Yeah. All it takes is to work with it, because most of these photo editors, they all know each other. I mean, and I know this to be true because I know 2 or 3 that all know each other, and so you screw one, man, you screwed.
Yeah.
But if you go above and beyond for one, like I'll give you a good example. I used one recently before the pandemic broke out. I had an assignment from a magazine. I almost said it. I won't say the name of the magazine, but I had an assignment, and so it was projected to go through April.
Okay.
Well, because I had already kind of saw it was starting to get kind of rocky.
Yeah.
I started making phone calls earlier to the people I had to photograph. So I actually did the entire shoot probably 4 or 5 weeks before it was even due.
Oh, wow.
So once I got everything done and edited, and this was probably in the second week of, this is probably when everybody was quarantined, like that second week of March, when most people start shutting it down.
Yeah.
I emailed the client and was like, hey, I got everything done. And so they responded, and I get, everybody had to get used to working at home. So she responded last week and was just blown out the water, like, oh man, you were actually able to do it. You got it done. That was an opportunity there. That client is probably going to work with me from here out.
Oh, sure.
That's probably because I went above and beyond.
Yep.
Sometimes you have to do that in order to build that relationship. And so once you, and I'm not saying go out there in the quarantine and go shoot. Go out and leave your house in the quarantine and go do a photo shoot. No, I'm definitely not saying that. So what I'm saying is, when you're given that opportunity, you have to make the best judgment and provide that client with that experience. Now that was a situation where I just saw, if I can get this done ahead of time, I can. If not, then I can't. And to even cover myself, I blanketed myself because I reached out to them prior to that and was like, hey, it's starting to get bad. What's our contingency plan? And they were even grateful for that. But I had already went ahead and got everything done because I had one other person that I was waiting on, and it took a little while for him to respond, and I was just doing it just to cover myself in case I never heard back from him. And so, of course, it all worked out. But communication and is key. I mean, I've got several clients that, we talked last time and off air. This is off air, but we talked. And I told you I had a couple of clients that's all just sitting there waiting, but those clients were all grateful because when this broke down, because this is a new experience. This is a completely new experience to everybody. I called the client and was like, hey, look, I'm not expecting to work for the next month or 2 or 3. And are y'all fine with that? And are y'all willing to come back later on this year and let's talk? And they said perfectly fine. And so taking that initiative to go to clients and talk to them in difficult situations, difficult times, especially when money's on the line for some of us, those clients are going to remember you.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make sure they take care of you, not just in the short term, in the long term. So,
but it all starts with, I mean, what I love is it all starts with the basics, right? What you're talking about isn't anything kind of earth shattering and something that probably most of our listeners haven't heard before. It's the basics. It's kindness. It's proactive communication. It's showing up on time. It's delivering, ideally beating expectations, but certainly delivering on time. The basics are what's going to actually get it done. And I also love that you didn't mention anything about photography. And by the way, for anybody who's listening in, you can see Matt's lovely work. If you go to mattodomphotography.com, and it's Matt Odom Photo on Instagram, he's got some beautiful work. So it's not that he doesn't care about the work. He just understands that it's the basics. Delivering a great client experience means just getting to the basics and delivering on those consistently that makes the big difference. Right, Matt?
Yep, that's correct. I mean, that's business 101, man. I mean, if you can get the job done efficiently and get the client what they need, then you're going to be in business for a while. If you're lackadaisical, then you're going to probably won't be in business for a long period of time. You probably, either that or you'll fumble and bumble for a few years before the light comes on.
Yep. No, that's the great. It's such a great reminder. And somebody listening in might say, "Well, that's such basic information." Of course you do that, but the reality is we don't all deliver on it consistently all the time, and it's really good to be reminded that we need to get back to the basics. That is where it all starts, and a lot of our business can actually run on those basic principles as long as we apply them consistently. So that's a great reminder. Talk to me, Matt, about the idea of outsourcing or delegation. We talked about time management the last time you were on the show. This is a pretty important component of time management. Have you found some benefit in the idea of delegation in your business?
Absolutely, especially when you start getting a lot of work. So a lot of times you don't. All right, so I'll tell people this. Let me throw this out there. I know how to use Photoshop and I know how to use Lightroom.
Yeah.
There are certain things in Photoshop that I prefer not to do. I'm not going to do a whole lot of compositing. I'm probably going to send that to somebody else to do it.
Right.
You have to know what your strong point is and your weak point. Whatever your strong point is, do it. Whatever your weak point is, let somebody else do it. I do real estate photography, and certain things in real estate photography, I just don't have the time to sit down and do because I've got other assignments to do.
Sure.
And so I outsource that stuff. I mean, it's just, you just understand. Now, if you can do it all, there's some photographers, man, that are gifted. I know a couple of commercial guys that do really good work, man, and they're able to do it and even do 3D rendering and stuff like that in the process of doing it. So, I mean, if you're gifted to where you can do all that, then by all means, do it. You'll save yourself money, but if you know that your weakness is compositing or your weakness is color balance or whatever, then don't be afraid to send that stuff out. First off, you should already be charging enough to where you should be able to outsource it if you need to anyway.
Right.
If you're not, then that's a whole nother discussion.
Well, and actually, I'm curious to your take on this because you mentioned obviously focusing on your strengths, delegating your weaknesses, and that makes sense. But you also mentioned the idea of saving money. Of course, the irony of holding on to all of this work, in many cases the busy work, including editing, can ultimately be time-consuming, which actually costs us money in the bigger picture, right? So where do you find the balance there between, quote, saving money, but then also delegating so you actually have time to focus on other things that will actually build your business?
Actually, man, what I found is that if you this is gonna sound funny, but if you actually outsource what you need to get outsourced, it actually works out for you long term because you're not having to explain yourself to a client. If that makes sense, you're not trying to have to explain why you're late on something,
Right.
or forfeiting a percentage of whatever they paid you because you couldn't get it done on time. How many? And I know you probably gonna start laughing. I'm bringing this up. How many photographers you talk to that do weddings that it takes them forever to do a wedding album? Because they want to do
months, or even longer. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, and for those who are videographers that just happen to be listening, we all know that videographer that recorded the wedding, and it's been 2 years, and the couple still haven't seen it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's funny, but it's not, right? I mean, it sucks for the client and the experience, and ultimately, it's a poor reflection on your brand.
Yep. I mean, it's better than you having to refund 60% of what they paid you, when all you need to do is send, maybe a couple of $50 or whatever to some people, and get somebody to edit whatever needs to be edited, and you're done.
Yep. Yeah. Your point is well made, Matt. I think that's a great perspective. Talk to me about inspiration outside of photography. I mean, you have your work is really interesting because it's very wide ranging. I know it's commercial and real estate, but it's just a really lovely variety. As I'm scrolling through your website, how do you find inspiration outside of the photography industry so you don't kind of get stuck with your blinders on only looking at other photographers' work?
Well, that's one of the things that I when I started, man. And I don't know if we talked about this last time or not, but I know when I started, I had a horrible habit of looking at other photographers' work, and I would compare myself to them. Well, what I stopped doing was looking at a lot of people's work, and then that's when my creativity started taking off.
Okay.
I mean, I still look at people's work now. I mean, I don't. It's not like I don't go look, take a look at people's work. What I stopped doing was comparing myself to other people, because a lot of times, as a photographer, your career goes on a slope. When you look like 3 years ago, you look at the photographer you were 3 years ago, Nate, and then you're like, darn, man, I don't do this anymore. I do, I'm different. You're different in different ways than what you were.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a sign of growth. Well, most photographers don't think about it that way. They think that they have to look like another photographer's work, and then they feel like they've achieved. And no, all you've done is just copied somebody. Yeah. I mean, so many photographers in our industry, and I've certainly been guilty of it, but you just kind of copy and paste what you're seeing somewhere else versus actually thinking outside of that. So, I mean, if you made that shift in your business and it encouraged your creativity, you stopped looking so much at other photographers, but do you find inspiration from any other sources outside of the photography industry that help you, encourage you think creatively? Yeah, actually, man, I do. I watch like film. I mean, movies.
Yeah.
Movies are great spots for inspiration, man.
Absolutely.
Because of the lighting.
Yeah.
The tones, the settings. Always, locally, I read a lot of newspapers. Sometimes I find stories, interesting people. I try to kind of think of things that would be interesting to people, and then of course, my personal projects. I don't do them as much as I used to because I work a lot now. But even like in this pandemic, I've thought about a couple of projects once this is over with that I could do.
What kind of projects would you do that would help kind of spur creativity?
I would love to do so. Like right now, man, if this thing was so contagious, man, I would love to photograph survivors. That would be absolutely phenomenal. The photograph survivors.
Yeah.
People who were like on their deathbed but just made it through. They've made it.
Wow.
I read a story of a guy today. Matter of fact, the guy that was the video coordinator at UGA, he beat the coronavirus. It took him 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I was like, dude, that would be a pretty cool story. Somebody sent me the photograph. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
But those are the kind of things that kind of like what I'm thinking about now is just telling good stories, because what's going to happen, man, is you go through something like this, we're going to need a lot of positivity. It's going to need to be you're going to need some positive stories coming out of this. People not even thinking about we got farmers that are still providing food, farm to table. You've got so many people being affected by this, excuse me. And, those are stories to be told,
Wow. Yeah. Well, it sounds like an incredible opportunity. It looks like maybe you'll have your hands full with that project too. It sounds like a really cool one.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm just waiting for this to be over with so I can kind of get back on the horse.
Well, let us know if you do pursue that project. We'd love to share that with our listeners, with our community. But you've mentioned the coronavirus or the pandemic that we're dealing with, and for anybody who's listening to this episode, and whether it's 3 months or 6 months or a year or a couple of years from now, we are currently, basically the country and segments of the world are kind of on lockdown. We're in quarantine and we're stuck indoors for quite a bit of time each day. And naturally, as a result, photography business owners are in a pretty tough spot because they can't get out and photograph. They can't generate revenue. And of course, naturally, then there are concerns or fears or stresses associated with our finances. And Matt, you and I had the chance to chat on the phone the other day, and it was cool to catch up. But one of the things that just really struck me as we were talking was just how at ease you are with your finances at the moment. Where does that just general sense of peace come from, just to get us started?
Well, and I'm not going to get too far ahead because I know one of the questions that we're going to talk about, but I will say that the main thing that I learned coming out of '08, because at that time I was working in TV.
Okay.
And so I got laid off. So I was out of work I was out of consistent work. Let me put it like this, consistent work for about two and a half years.
Wow.
And so I would get a job here and funding would be gone, or I would get laid off. I think I told you I got laid off twice in a month at one point.
Wow.
And then I got one job where I was only getting paid $600 a month. And I did that job for like 6 months.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. And so I learned the value of $1 easily. It didn't take much for me to learn the value of $1 after that. And
sure.
So, and this was all before this was like slightly before I even decided I would pursue photography. And so what I started doing was I would just put a little money aside, whatever I was making, man, I would hold on to it and I wouldn't live above my means. And I just carried that same philosophy through my photography career to where, I make a decent amount of money, but unless it's something I have to like really buy, I think my largest purchase to date now, outside of my property, we'll get that later on, was my car. Because I had a car I had ever since high school. I drove the car I had from high school.
Oh, no way.
From 1999 all the way to 2014.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, when I started out as a photographer, I was still driving my old beat up Honda Civic, man. And all
awesome.
All my gear fit in there. I could fit the whole entire everything in there, man. I could fit a stand, C-stand, everything was fitting in that Honda Civic, man.
Wow.
Lights, and this is back when I had Paul C. Buff lights. So I had the Vagabond, 2 Vagabonds, all that kind of stuff was fitting in there. And I just was like, no, everybody was like, oh, you need to get a new car. I was like, no, I'll get one when this one finally tips over.
Yeah, yeah.
And even then, when it did tip over, I went and got a car that I could actually afford.
Sure, yeah.
The Dave Ramsey route, get you something that you can afford and then keep on rolling, And that's what I did. And I thank God that's what I did, because had I got something that was way out of control, man, I'd probably still be paying on it right now in the middle of this, which would be a nightmare.
Right. And it just seems like you, first of all, it started from a place of gratitude, because you mentioned you've been through the recession in '08. You knew what it was like to not have a job, or if you had a job, minimal amount of income. And so just starting with a certain level of gratitude and awareness has put you in a much better place. And it's, of course, it's trickled down to your actual behavior as an individual, as a business owner. And you commented on some of these ideas the other day some of the things that you were doing when we were chatting on the phone. And I was like, hey, can we do a podcast about this? And so we're here today. And I'm just going to give a little bit of context to the conversation too, I want to be really clear. Neither Matt nor myself are financial planners or advisors. None of this is meant to be professional advice. I just wanted Matt to share a little bit of his perspective, what he's learned that's enabled him in a time like this, which is so crazy. We don't have the opportunity to photograph, to generate revenue, to be at such. He's just relaxed. You can hear his voice, and this was the vibe that I was getting from Matt the other day too when we were chatting. And I was like, man, can we talk about this? Because I think it's good we don't talk enough about money in the industry. And it's funny the number of times that I've heard from photographers, even on the podcast, Matt. They add this caveat, which is like, it's not all about money, but, and then, whatever they fill in the blank after that. But the reality is we're running businesses, and So we've got to think proactively about our finances, the way that we manage our money. And I've said this before in the podcast, but I put myself in a really tough spot because I didn't do this very thing as a photography business owner. And so I would love to get the word out and at least start the conversation. Matt's going to share some food for thought today around this idea of managing our finances proactively so that for the future, if we ever end up in a situation like this again, that we can all be in a much better place, not just financially, but mentally as a result. I think it's really important. So Matt, one of the first points that you mentioned the other day, you were talking about how photographers, just in general, they have an interesting opportunity, which is they make more money in less time than the average person. And I don't think we think about this reality very much. Like the idea that somebody hands us a check for $3,000 or $5,000 after we go, especially wedding photographers, go do a shoot for 8 hours. It's a mind-blowing concept. Will you share your thoughts on this idea?
Sometimes doing editorial work doesn't pay a lot, to the average person. I had this discussion with photographers all the time. They're like, "Oh man, editorial photographers don't make a lot of money," and I'm like, I understand what you're saying in the scope of is not an advertising job.
Sure. But
if someone's getting paid $1,800 to work for 20 minutes, then you tell me, well, if you can find that job for me out in the regular world where you pay $1,800 for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Then I'll go do it.
Seriously.
I'll sign up for it right now.
Yeah.
I'll sign up for it. We're making even 500, 600 on the retail side. Some people actually charge $800 a portrait session on the retail side.
Right.
And getting it.
Right.
And so you're making that 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 times a week. There's no reason that you shouldn't be saving money. But I'm going to tell you, it was when you were talking, after something hit my mind that I did not bring up last time. That hit me this time. One of the problems that keeps photography broke. One of the main problems is that you don't hear about it. You don't hear it, but it's the elephant in the room that nobody brings up. Gear lust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right now we're in a situation, and I've seen 2 or 3 photographers talking about buying gear, and I'm like, matter of fact, I know someone just bought a drone last week, and I was like, why are you buying a drone in the middle of a pandemic? And I'm just like, I understand, yeah, you might want to go outside and whatever, but right now, gear is not. You need to be taking care of the 4 walls.
Yes, absolutely.
Gear right now is of absolute not even discussion. Somebody asked me, are you buying a new camera? I'm like, I'm not buying a new camera no time soon. Especially since this happened.
Right.
Now, I was thinking about getting a new camera towards the end of the year, but since this happened, no, I'm not even worried about it right now. That's the least. I've already got 2. At this point of the game, why would I even entertain that? That's money that doesn't need to be spent.
Well, and we actually did talk about this a little bit the other day. You were talking about how I think you said something about how we've got this gear that is amazing as it is. The notion that we have to continue to go buy the latest thing is just kind of crazy. I can think back to my first digital camera as a professional photographer because I started in film. My first digital camera was a Nikon D1X. It was less than 6 megapixels. The dynamic range was terrible. And yet I could get a stunning 20 by 30, 30 by 40 print out of that thing if I did it well. And yet we're worried about not having, 58,000 megapixels. It's crazy these days what we're trying to upgrade for.
This is about a year or 2 ago. I remember this forum I was on, and this guy put up this photo, and it was like, this is the most followed Nat Geo photo, and it was shot on a 3 megapixel camera.
Yep.
And I was just like, this is exactly why I tell people I don't this whole gear lust thing, man. It's crazy. It's like people. The Sony came out with a new Mark, whatever, and so everybody's got to go get that one. It's only about 5 megapixels better than the one that's got.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like you were getting it. Like for me, I tell you, I was thinking about getting a new Canon camera, the new mirrorless.
Okay.
Partly because I suffer from carpal tunnel.
Okay.
And so. A 5D Mark IV, it gets heavy.
Yeah.
Or a 5DSR, it gets heavy.
Yeah.
And so after a while, your wrist starts to hurt. And so I said, well, I'll probably break down and get a mirrorless camera once they get the stuff that I need on it. But I'm not getting it just to say I got the latest and greatest. I'm actually getting it because I actually need it.
Right. Well, which brings me, I mean, you mentioned the significance of saving. I think it's a good reminder for everybody listening in. Just don't be stupid about buying gear. It's in most cases, you've got something that's more than good enough and will be probably for even a year or 2 or 3 to come. There's no need to jump to spend money on something like this that isn't actually adding value to your business. It's not helping you generate more revenue. I get that gear is fun. I like getting new gear occasionally, whether it's for a motorcycle because I ride motorcycles, or gear for my motorcycle, or some type of electronic gadget. It's fun. I get it, but the reality is that most cases we have what is more than good enough to do what we need to do. And the reality is we could work on stepping up our own game using the existing equipment rather than spending more money. And then that money can be put away or invested in some way, which really leads me to my next question, Matt. You talked about the significance of saving. Is there a particular percentage of revenue that you have found, at least for yourself personally, that's best to save from your experience?
All right. One, if you're paying taxes, you need to be saving 30% anyway.
100%.
If you're paying taxes,
if you're not paying taxes, you're not paying taxes, watch out.
That's why I was like watching people this week with the stimulus check. Like we were like, oh man, and I was like, somebody said, well, it's not saying that I got anything. It's not saying anything. I was like, if you paid your taxes, don't worry, you'll be getting a paper check. You might just you don't worry, you'll be getting it if you paid your taxes.
Right.
No, I've just learned that I put away at least 20%.
Okay. Wow.
20% at least what I make, at least 20%. And a part of that is one, in case an emergency happens.
Right.
Because I think there's, what's the statistic? I think they said like over so many Americans don't even have $400 in the bank.
Yeah.
I find that shocking. Like, wow,
Yes.
Especially if you're making, a decent amount of change. And what blew my mind, I'll tell you what just blew my mind. And I think we talked about this is, I know people who are making like 6-figure jobs, man, and they're struggling right now.
Right.
And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And it's like, they never thought about saving money because we've been conditioned to spend. And I know photographers make really good money, make more than I do. And they're talking about they're struggling. And I'm just like, well, how are you living? Because see, this is a discussion that a lot of photographers don't like to have. Is, are we living within our means? Photography, our income fluctuates by the year. Some years is good, some years is bad. I remember my last year wasn't as good as the year before last. This year is way better than the year before last.
Right.
So it goes up in cycles. So you need to be saving at least 15 to 20%. And I'm being modest, 15 to 20% on that end. And if you're making a really good year, you really need to be saving about 30 to 40% because it's not a guarantee that you're going to be making that money the following year. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Weddings change. I mean, think about the wedding industry right now. I mean, this. I mean, look at the money, the income that was lost the last month and this month and next month in certain places. I mean, look at the percentage. We're at the height of wedding season right now. We're supposed to be at the height of wedding season right now for photographers. And all of that money is gone. That's money that somebody probably thought they automatically had made.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying is that you cannot bank on what's coming in the future, especially on that end, especially when it comes to weddings, because all it takes now is a bride to go, you know what? Because what'll happen is these brides and grooms look at, you know what? It's tight right now. Money's tight. We really don't need to have to do such and such. And now they'll just stay home, and say, you know what? We'll just go to the courthouse and get married. Right. And we'll just, instead of doing a full-on wedding, we'll just do a portrait session. We'll pay them, we'll just get a portrait session done. So you've lost that income that you probably would have got on that wedding.
Yeah, we're likely going to see some of that. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in general. But the thing is, we can't control that. We certainly can't control the coronavirus. The thing that we can do, that we do have some control over, is how we manage our spending and how much we save, which will then give us a sense of peace in times like this. Because, man, it's so stressful. And there have been times in my life, significant amounts of time actually in my life in the past, where I've dealt with significant financial stress, and what that does to yourself as an individual, what it does to you as a business owner, how it saps your energy from being able to think creatively as a business owner, proactively as a business owner, what it can do to relationships. It's a nightmare. And what we could be doing consistently on an ongoing basis is just simply setting aside this percentage of income, put it in a bank, maybe do a combination of savings and investments, and you can talk to somebody that knows what to do with regards to investments. You can invest some of it, but put it aside so that you've got it for times like this. And if you don't have to ever have to spend it for times like this, then even better. But that is something you can control. You can't control what might happen. What you can do is control how you spend and ultimately how you save. And this is a really great reminder. So 20%, we're gonna lock it in. You said 15 to 20. I'm gonna say 20. Let's just go 20.
We'll go 20
for all the listeners out there. But talk to me about something else. This is something you mentioned the other day. The significance of cutting costs of production. Now, is this something that is relevant to only commercial photographers? Do you think it's relevant to portrait and wedding photographers as well?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll tackle it from both sides.
Okay.
Let's start with the wedding side first. Let's say weddings and portraits. All right. So a lot of these wedding venues may not even be around once this is over with. People, it's a tough topic, but some of these places are struggling. And so what happens is wedding photographers are going to be placed in a situation to where they're really going to have to start proving to these bride and grooms that their services are needed. And it's kind of, let me put it to you this way. It's going back to the way it used to be. You remember Nate, probably back in 2010, 2011,
sure,
when everything was back on the uptick.
Yep.
And you would have to go back, and it was, you would have to really prove to those bride and grooms that, hey, this is what I offer, this is that.
Sure.
And then you saw a period where it went to where venues started popping up all over the place. You remember that?
Yeah, it's true.
You remember it just went through a phase where everybody had a wedding venue. The wedding venue here, everybody. And now you look, we go back just earlier last year, and you see where they were all over the place. It's mainstream, Well, now that this is hit, people could very well be cutting costs. And wedding photographers could very well be what is on the, what's cut.
Yeah.
And so now photographers are going to have to work extra hard to prove their worth to a client, because some clients are going to be valuing the venue over the photographer. And then in some cases, that same venue, the venues are going to have to figure out how are they going to push themselves to brides, because some of these places are going to be struggling.
Right.
Struggling, especially these places that's in metropolitan areas, like up in Atlanta. It's going to be rough for a minute. And on my side of things, because I talked to someone just today, as a matter of fact, talked to someone that was saying that production is starting to ramp up. They're still talking about doing shoots, but everybody's got to figure out, well, how are we going to do it? Especially in this climate. Like, how are we going to pull these shoots off? How's this going to happen? And so I've had about 2 or 3 jobs. I had 2 or 3 jobs hit me up within the last month. And they're all like, yeah, we want to do the job. We just don't know when. We don't know when, and we can't figure out how, because of the issue of putting people at risk, which is something we didn't talk about, is that now we're in a situation, a real gray area. I call it gray area, where as a photographer, and I've seen 1 or 2 photographers actually working in this. And I'm not talking like guys who are working for the press in New York. That's a completely different ball game. And when I'm talking Associated Press, Nat Geo, stuff like that, that's completely different. What I'm seeing is people going out doing real estate shoots. I've seen people go out. I even saw one person try to do a portrait session. When you are doing that kind of stuff, those type things, you're putting not only the client at risk, but you're putting yourself at risk. And you're putting yourself at risk for a lawsuit. Because we all know how quick how people are quick to sue now. Doesn't take much. And so that's a risk that I tell people is just really not worth the reward.
So there are a lot of risks at hand. I mean, there's the potential certainly of losing business. We may have to work harder to get the business. And in some way, I mean, for at least wedding photographers, this may be tied to, as you pointed out, some of the venues. But ultimately, how does this tie to cutting costs in production? How can wedding photographers, portrait photographers, and certainly commercial photographers cut the costs of doing business in order to save a little bit more money, to be a bit more proactive with their finances?
Well, one of the things that I think that you could probably do, Nate, and I know if this was me, I would probably have to look at restructuring packages. And we talked about this. I'll probably restructure some packages, because people are gonna come out of this, and like I told you, if I had not gone through this before, then I wouldn't be able to answer these questions like I can.
Sure. People
are gonna come out of this hurting, so people are gonna have to start taking that into consideration. Yeah, I know there's the section of photographers. Well, yeah, I'm going to be getting paid my worth. This is what I feel like I'm worth. Well,
yeah, that's just ego talking, though, right?
Yeah, you exactly. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so if that's the mindset you want to have, then that's fine. You probably won't be in business much longer. But if you are actually trying to start from scratch, and I'm going to tell people this, I'm going to give people some optimism. People are going to be ready to spend money and come out.
Yeah.
They may not have enough to have that amount that you were making before we went into this.
Right.
But it's going to work itself back up to where it was.
Absolutely.
And so you're going to have to be mindful going forward. I've got clients that, think about this. I've got companies and businesses that are struggling. They're still trying to make payroll in certain cases. I can't expect them to pay the top dollar.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can do is work with them with what they have. Not only will they pay me, but in the end, once again, it goes back to the very first question you asked about customer service. That client will always remember that, and they will always call you. You have to think long-term client relationship.
Right.
Going forward. Don't look for the quick dollar. Go for long-term. If you have a client that's worked with you for over 10 years, 5 years, that client is going to pay you 2-3 times more over than you would probably make on one job. So I'd rather have a client that I'm dealing with consistently for 10 years, because if I'm consistently dealing with somebody for 10 years or a bunch of clients for 10 years, guess what? I've been in business for how long? 10 years. It's just one of those things that people don't think about.
Well, I think so a couple of points that you made. One, we do have to be willing to set ego aside, understand that adjustments may be necessary, because I tend to agree with you. I'm very hopeful, actually, as a business owner, as an individual, that there is going to be even a strong rebound from this. And you're right, there may not be as much money to spend, but I think people are going to be so stoked to be free again and to get out and to go about living their lives again, that they are going to be willing to spend money. We just have to understand it may not be as much. So to your original point about cutting costs of production, we might be able to rephrase this almost as just being willing to adjust price points of the services that we're offering. We have to at least be open-minded to that idea if we want to keep up business, if we want to book new business. Just understand that the mindset of the market that we work in, the marketplace that we work in, may be different. And in fact, may likely be different when we come out of this, when we're on the other side of this and we can actually start working again. I think we have to be open-minded to that idea.
Yep. If we could rephrase it, that's exactly what I would say.
And then I want to hit on one more point, and this is something that you brought up that was also really interesting to me in our conversation the other day. You mentioned rental property. Now, again, I want to reiterate, neither you nor myself are financial advisors here, so we're just kind of talking about Matt's experience. But I think this is a really great example of a photography business owner thinking outside the little box that they live in, as in, this is the only way that I can generate revenue, income for myself. You stepped outside of that, and you've actually found benefit in purchasing and renting property. Can you give a little bit of context to that conversation?
Absolutely, man. I about a year ago, I came across a job. I had a job that paid really good money on one job, and so having paid the IRS $28,000 a couple of years ago, I was like, I don't want to do that again. And so I was like, if I'm going to do something, of course I pay my tax, but I was like, you know what? If I'm making large lump sums of money like
right,
then I've got to find I started thinking about what happens if something like this happens. I was like, oh man, what happens? Because I'm not working. And so I said, well, I've got to find a vehicle that can generate income, and so that's a friend of mine mentioned to me about doing real estate. And of course, at first I kind of was like, I hadn't thought about it, but then he sat me down and showed me and was like, hey man, you can find you a decent property. And I think a lot of times people think it requires a whole lot of money. And it doesn't. You don't have to go find $100,000 house and rent it out.
Right.
You can go find you a nice $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 house, depending on your market. And in some cases, if you look hard enough, man, this is what I struck gold was. I found a property that only needed about roughly maybe $3,500 of fix up.
Okay.
And so I was able to get that house up and running and having a tenant in. And so my mortgage is so low that my tenant covers my mortgage like 2 times over.
Wow. And
so even with this pandemic, I gave them like last month, and then I told them we'd talk about May, but they're still working, so I'll probably end up getting rent for the next couple of months. And this is just on a monthly basis.
Sure.
Just as, on a per month basis, depending on how everything turns out. But they are, they've treated me well, man. And even in this pandemic, man, I'm still getting paid, in addition to what I was getting paid when I was working, doing my jobs. So that extra money that I made on my rental properties was going straight to the bank, and then of course, if anything happens, I need to fix a toilet or things of that magnitude, I'm able to still get that done and paid without a problem. But It allows me to sleep easy at night knowing that I've got a little something coming in. It's almost kind of like I call it my inadvertent Social Security check coming in. And so what I do is I take that money and I save it, or if things happen at that property that needs to get fixed, it's able to get fixed. And,
right.
And in certain cases, if I need to get if I wanted to reinvest it in the stocks or whatever, take some of that money and get stocks, I could. But I just need to have something knowing that I had a little bit of a shelter, because it goes back to once again we make a lot of money in this business, and some of us just we don't know exactly because we're not taught. This is once you're a photographer, man, you in. It's kind of like you in, you make money. That's it. We're not taught about diversifying our income.
Right. Yep.
About put a little bit here, save for retirement.
Yep.
Things of that magnitude. And so when we hit a rough spell like this is when everybody like, oh man, what do I do? I hadn't thought about it, and that's not to knock anybody, because I was like that. I told you, I didn't start thinking about it until last year. Was like, okay, because stocks are cool. And we talked about this. Stocks take time. Stocks take a long period of time.
Yeah.
If you go back to 2000, I want to say Nike stock was $5.
Yeah, our mutual friend Sean was just posting about that today or yesterday.
Yeah. And so then you look, it took so long for it to get to where it is. Well, most of us are in our 30s and 40s. Well, 50s and 60s is when all your health issues start popping up. Lord willing, that doesn't happen. But that's when you have to start thinking about that phase. So, well, what's going to help you get quicker to that phase is rental property. I've got some guys. What blew my mind about this, man, was I play soccer. Me and you talk about. Most folks know I play soccer, and so I've got some guys I play soccer with, man. And these guys will consistently be going on vacation, and so I was like, man, what do you do? You're just like, what? I want that kind of lifestyle. What are y'all doing?
Yeah.
And one of my buddies, that's a real estate agent, he told me, he said, well, Matt, he said most of these guys, man, they're buying rental properties and they're renting them out. And one guy I know, he has like 133.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're all on Section 8. So he's getting guaranteed money every month. So he doesn't have to. He just takes 2 weeks off of a month and goes to collect this rent. And in this case, and even now, I talked to him, and he's like, "Yeah, they just deposit all. Everybody set up for it's set up for direct deposit, so it comes to his account.
Right.
And he doesn't even worry about the percentage that they have to pay. He just told them to keep because he still gets paid for the not Social Security, but the Section 8. And then for those who don't do Section 8, I know a good buddy of mine who is the same real estate agent. He actually plays in a band majority of the time. Well, of course now he's not playing in a band. So well, guess where his money's coming from? Rental properties. He's got like 4 or 5 rental properties.
Yep.
And so he's making his money or what have you until he can get back up and rolling.
But I want to get back, though, to what you said, though. I mean, what even enables us in the first place is just thinking proactively. You mentioned when you made that lump sum from one of the jobs, you get paid really well. You know, the average response might be, oh my goodness, I have all this money. Let me go buy this car, or let me go do this thing, or go do that. And you were like, you know what? Let me invest some of this. And you've done that. It's already generating dividends for you, which is fascinating and even more interesting. And we may actually have the opportunity here very soon to do an episode on kind of an intro to stock trading episode. And because I think it's an important conversation for photographers, again, as you pointed out, Matt, to think about diversifying revenue streams. But if you've got a rental property that's generating revenue and you're actually making a profit from that, you take that money and invest that. Now it's a double win in the long run.
And let me throw this in there too for those who might have student loans. I mean, hey, you know, if you don't want to pay student loans, hey, get you some rental property, let your tenant pay it for you.
Yeah.
Pay on your student loans that way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just so many ways that I always use the analogy, you know, how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time.
Yes.
You don't eat it all at one time. You just bit by bit by bit by bit, you know.
Yeah. Wow. It's such a loaded conversation. And I know that this is like you and I, Matt, are kind of talking beyond our pay grade or our profession, if you will. But I just thought that it was such a great conversation the other day. I was very impressed by, had a lot of respect for, and ultimately encouraged too by our conversation. And I wanted to share just in a conversational manner, the stuff that you had shared with me, with our listeners. And if nothing else, for those of you listening in, some of this, maybe you already knew, maybe you're already doing it. Others, maybe not. Take it at least as food for thought, points of consideration, talk to a financial planner, even start with something as basic as talking to your accountant and looking at how you can proactively save in the way that you're managing your income and your revenue streams when it comes to taxes, but be proactive. That's the key thing here. Yep. We need to stop reacting. We need to start thinking proactively when it comes to our money.
Yep. Most people don't even realize that you can go to that you can get a SEP IRA, which I actually have one of those too, a SEP IRA, and you can. I think that is you can fund that up to like $50,000 or something like that. I can't quite remember exactly how it operates, but I know that it's tax. It's tax deductible, and it's basically, man, like for a regular person that has a IRA, they can only put a percentage in up to so much, but we can go way past that threshold because most of us are, you know, we're small businesses, and so I would tell people, man, check with your local bank, check with your local financial advisor. You know, it's called a SEP, SEP IRA, and it's something that you might want to look at if for retiring. But I'll always say diversify your money. Make sure you got not just in one particular pot, but you kind of got it spread out all over the place.
Yep. No, that's a good way to really sum up the conversation. Yep. I really appreciate you making time to share with our community. Come back and hang out with me, Matt. And
no problem, man. I'm always good talking with you, Nate.
Well, and would you mind just sharing one more time where our listeners can follow you, your website, and social media as well?
Yep, you can follow me. I'm more active on IG than I am on Facebook, but my website is Matt Odom Photography, MattOdom Photography.com. And you can find me on IG as Matt Odom Photo, all one word. And you can always check out my other podcast that we did about, what is it, a year ago now?
It's been something like that. Yeah, episode 245. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com along with Matt's site and social media. And once again, thanks for making time to hang out with us, Matt. This has been a really great conversation.
Hey, man, likewise, man, and you be safe, brother.
Thank you so much for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@photographersedit.com. The Bokeh Podcast is brought to you by Milu, the simplest way for photographers and coordinators to collaborate on shot lists and timelines for weddings, parties, and other amazing events. Visit Milu, MIILU.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Photographer's Edit, custom image editing for the professional photographer. Visit photographersedit.com.